So, you want to know how to build the perfect team comp, eh? I bet you've been on the end of one of these questions in one way or another. I'm free to play with Venti, Chi-Chi, and Fischl. Should I draw for X and Y? Or, who should I choose as a fourth with this team composition? The thing about these sorts of questions is that there's not really an easy way to answer because one, each character can be built to perform a number of roles. Not to mention, I don't really like telling people how to play their game when a majority of the content is solo or co-op PvE. Like, I could say throw Amber in there, give a convincing enough argument, and the person would probably invest in Amber even though they probably have better Pyro characters. Like, I don't know their whole roster, and not to mention the playstyles I enjoy may contradict those that they do. All that and meta's a little overrated. There's a creator, Enviosity, literally clearing the spiral with only the 100% guaranteed characters and has cleared 11-3. That's 75% of the spiral done with just Barbara, Kaya, Amber, Traveler, Lisa, Jingling, and Noelle with no constellations. You heard me right, no constellations and only craftable weapons. Trust me when I say anything you get past the base characters is gravy, as in miles upon miles more powerful. People don't like to hear the real answer to that question because it doesn't matter. That's the answer. Before you leave, let me explain. For the overworld, so like the core of the content you're exploring around the map, your team comp doesn't matter. You can heal for free at the statues and you'll generally outscale everything, so the best team that you can make is generally one that you freaking enjoy. Exceptions being that like later domains for talents, artifacts, etc., they're gonna be almost like the spiral. You're gonna have auras and elements that you're gonna have to deal with and react to specifically. So probably don't bring a hydro only damage character to the hydro domain. And for the spiral, I just said it. They're gonna be auras, elements, ley line disruptions, and a variety of enemies that you're gonna have to react to, and there's likely no way that you're just gonna headcanon a team and it be, quote, perfect for the spiral. In my attempts just to 6-star floor 10, I had to constantly swap my teams around in a battle of clear times and completion. Like, I had to completely reverse the teams that I used on floor 1 just to be able to clear floor 2. That being said, hopefully the rest of the video can give you the tools so that making a team composition and answering such questions is a little bit easier, right? First and foremost, you want to look at a character and try to figure out what their role is, right? You like to use it as like a spectrum, and that's kind of key because there's not really always a bucket where you can just dump a character. Some characters can honestly fit in a variety of roles and places, and you have build variety and control of that via artifacts. That being said, it doesn't really matter if you go for DPS if that's what you enjoy, right? Like, you don't have to sit here and listen to me and be like, oh, I need one of every role, because that's not how it works. I'm just saying, look at a character, try to figure out what you need on your team or want on your team, and blam! You can probably figure out what role, what artifacts, etc. you should put on a character. So the first I think about is my primary DPS, someone who needs to be on the field to do damage, like Diluc. Then I think about a secondary DPS, somebody who can either be support or use elemental reactions off field, like Jingling, right? Goba lowers pyro resistance, drops a 10% attack buff after 4th Ascension, and her ult persists after character swap. These are all just glorious things to have on like a secondary DPS. That being said, you can have a character that may not be the best at it still perform this role, right? And just give them a lot of elemental mastery or energy recharge. A primary support would be a support that needs to be on the field in order to buff or heal, right? Like Noelle without constellations or talents. And then a secondary support would be a support that uses the elemental skills or bursts, so someone like Bennett, Chongyun, Barber, or Jingcho. And then the last role I like to think about is crowd control, CC, or in this game primarily focused on grouping, which is a little bit limited to Venti, Sucrose, Animo, Traveler, and a little lesser extent Jean. That being said, you can totally build your Barber to do damage while she heals, and then, work around the fact that she's not going to be able to do much against Hydro enemies, and that she may not deal as much damage as Mona since her heals scale off of her max HP, so you'll likely be sacrificing some damage to improve that stat. Any build is a trade-off, and any team comp that you have is going to make one in some way. Let's look a little bit closer at building characters for roles. Jingling, for example, at the moment is one of my primary DPS characters, but if I were to use her for only her elemental skill or burst, I would probably build her more as a secondary DPS character. I could change my weapon to something like the Halberd, where I could just EQ auto for a burst of damage, or a polearm that scales elemental mastery or energy recharge. In terms of artifacts, your flowers and feathers are always going to have the base stats of flat health and attack respectively, so it's primary decent relevant substats that you'll be praying for in this regard. All of the info for potential primary stat spawn should exist on a wiki somewhere, so for example, circlets have a chance to spawn percentage HP, percentage percentage defense, percentage attack, elemental mastery, critical rate, critical damage, and healing bonus. With 3 artifact slots, the crown, cup, and timepiece, you're going to be doing a lot of mixing and matching. So for example, you can forego elemental mastery because Jing scales with it innate, and you can opt for something else, or you can double down on the elemental mastery and increase the damage of specific elemental reactions if that's the core of your team flow or a specific Spiral Abyss buff. Just know that it scales for some elemental reactions better than others. And there's a point of potential diminishing returns, like for example, if your weapon had 30% attack percentage, you'd probably be better off going crit rate or crit damage on your crown and elemental or physical damage bonuses on your cup, depending on what kind of damage you wanted to enhance, or more importantly, how your character scales. Make sure you read. For example, Barbara scales primarily off of her max HP, and Jingcho scales off of max HP for healing and hydro damage bonus for damage mitigation. I hope taking the time to go through this helps you feel a little bit more confident in managing your teams, and honestly, some of it does come down to personal preference and in what role you prefer or character. That's part of what makes it just so hard to answer some of these questions sometimes. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm stifling people's creativity and essentially having them play the game that I would play, because there's potentially more fun or even more efficient ways to do so. Regardless, thank you for taking the time to listen. You can find me being nonsensical on Twitch, and for your next quest, go tell that person in the mirror that they're beautiful and give them a kiss and take them out to some tasty noms.